The train didn't stop for long. Just enough for the dust to settle, for boots to thud against frozen boards, for a paper ticket to crumple beneath a calloused palm. She stepped down without help. No one reached for her suitcase. No one asked her name. They didn't need to. She was the kind of girl people thought they already understood. Plain skirt. Heavy boots. A shawl pulled tight against a wind that didn't care. Her hands told the truth before her lips ever could, cracked at the knuckles, bruised at the nail beds. Fingers strong from lifting, not holding. Hands that had done more than their share of lifting what others had left behind. She paused beneath the station overhang. Her breath came out in small, cloudy puffs, white against the sharp air. She blinked snowflakes from her lashes, then turned her face toward the town she'd come to marry into. It wasn't big. Wasn't pretty either. A church steeple tilted westward. A saloon leaned toward the wind. One crooked sign read General Store, letters half worn away. But to her, after years bent over laundry tubs and kitchen stoves, it looked like a place where something soft might finally grow. She walked with purpose, though each step pressed down harder than the last. Not from fear. From hope. The heavier burden. The letter he'd sent her said he needed a wife who could work. Said he didn't want no porcelain doll. Said he valued grit. She had grit in her teeth most mornings. She carried grit in her bones. He was waiting in front of the sheriff's office, arms crossed, coat too clean for the weather. He looked her up and down like a buyer at a stock auction. "This is a mistake," he said. She opened her mouth. Closed it again. The weight of the train ticket still pressed into her fingers. "You're not what I asked for. I meant work ethic, not rough." He didn't say ugly, but it hung in the space between them, thick as smoke. "You said you wanted someone who could labor." He nodded. "Yeah. Behind closed doors. I don't need folks thinking I married a dockhand." The street had grown quieter. Someone stepped out of the saloon to watch. She swallowed. Not the lump in her throat, but the anger rising underneath. "I crossed 2 territories," she said. "Spent everything I had." He shrugged. "Ain't my problem." The town kept watching. Not loudly. Just long enough to brand her with their silence. She walked away without looking back. She didn't cry. Not when the boarding house turned her away, saying rooms were for decent girls or paying ones. Not when her last coin clinked into the palm of a boy half her size in exchange for a crust of bread. That night she sat behind the post office, back to the cold wall, arms around her knees. She watched her own breath disappear. She thought of home, not because she missed it but because she didn't know if she still had one. A cat crept past. Even it didn't stop. She thought about the soft girls. The ones with bright eyes and voices like spun sugar. The ones who learned to curtsy, not carry. Who looked good in photos and never bled through their gloves. She didn't hate them. She just wasn't one of them. And no one had ever taught her how to pretend. By morning, the frost had painted the tips of her hair silver. She shook it off, stood, and walked the town with a chin that refused to drop. Work, she told herself. Just find work. The bakery took her on for scrubbing. Not baking, scrubbing. Buckets, floors, soot-rimmed ovens. She didn't mind. Dirt didn't scare her. People did. The girl at the counter looked through her. The baker's wife gave her orders like she was stone. Still she worked. When her arms ached, she worked. When the heat scalded her palms, she worked. When the voices outside said, "That labor girl," she worked harder. One man noticed. Or maybe he just didn't look away. He was tall, quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't demand a room's attention, but held it anyway. A rancher, they said. Lived a little past the ridge. Didn't speak unless needed. Didn't judge unless asked. She noticed the way he loaded feed with care. The way he tied his horse with gentler hands than most men offered women. The way he left a wrapped loaf beside the widow's door when he thought no one saw. He didn't look at her the way the others did. Not like she was something pitiful or strange. Not like she was invisible either. He just looked, then looked away. Like she was real. One afternoon, her fingers slipped on a crate of flour sacks. The whole thing collapsed, powder blooming across the ground like smoke. The baker's wife cursed. The counter girl giggled. But before she could gather her breath or her shame, the rancher knelt beside her. Didn't speak. Didn't scold. He just lifted one sack, then another without a word and helped her rest tack the weight. When he was done, he tipped his hat once. Walked away. She didn't thank him. Not because she didn't want to, but because her throat locked tight with something far too big for words. That evening, she mended her only pair of stockings with thread so thin it snapped twice before holding. Her hands ached. But the ache didn't feel hollow. In the weeks that followed, their paths crossed like wind-shifted trails. At the well he passed her a ladle first. At the store he let her go ahead in line. At church he sat 3 pews behind, not close enough to stir talk, not far enough to ignore. She never asked his name. He never asked hers. Still, the spaces between them grew smaller. The town noticed. They always do. "She's got her claws in him," the baker's wife muttered. "She'll trap him, just wait," said the counter girl. "She's not marriage stock. She's work stock." The words bit like frost. She didn't cry. Not until the day her knees buckled in the kitchen and the world tilted black. She woke to cold air on her face, a coat over her shoulders, and the quiet rancher sitting on the porch rail like he'd been carved into it. He didn't look panicked. Just steady. Just there. "You fainted," he said, eyes on the horizon. "Could have cracked your head." She nodded. Her throat burned. "Water's there. I'll walk you back when you're ready." She tried to thank him, but the words tangled like broken fence wire. So she just nodded again. And when he stood and held out his hand, she took it. His palm was warm. Dry. Callous too. But not like hers. His felt like safety. The town whispered louder now. Said she'd bewitched him. Said a woman like her should know her place. She heard every word. And for the first time didn't bend beneath it. Because one man hadn't looked away. And sometimes that's all it takes to make a woman remember she exists. She returned to work the next morning. Held her head a little higher. Fixed the oven hinge without being told. When she swept the bakery stoop, she noticed something tucked beside the steps. A sprig of wintergreen. Wrapped in twine. No note. Just a gesture. Small. Unspoken. But louder than anything she'd ever been given. And for the first time in a very long time, she let herself smile. Just a little. Just enough to feel like the frost might melt someday. The snow came early that year. Not a heavy fall, just enough to coat the porch railings and hush the wind. Enough to soften the hard edges of the town, but not its people. She moved through it like someone used to cold. Shawl wrapped tight. Eyes forward. Hands red from work, skin cracking at the joints. The kind of woman who didn't wait for spring to be kind. They still whispered. Behind barrels. Between baked goods. Over sewing circles where fingers moved faster than hearts. "She's making eyes at him," someone said. "Not decent, the way she lingers near his land. She'll wear him down. They always do." No one said these things where she could answer. Only loud enough to bruise. She didn't flinch anymore. But she felt it. Like splinters you don't remove, until one morning you wake and the whole palm aches. He didn't speak of the rumors either. Not the rancher. But one morning as she passed by the general store with a basket of mended linens, she found a bundle sitting atop the steps. 3 fresh logs. Cut tied and clean. She paused. Not because she needed wood. But because someone had given it without being asked. She carried it home like it weighed nothing. Later that week he stopped by the bakery while she scrubbed the floor. Didn't ask for bread. Didn't glance at the sweets. Just said, "You ever fix hinges?" She blinked at him, hands still wet. "I've tried." He nodded. "Mine's sticking. If you've time." She followed him out without asking what he meant by mine. His land stretched quiet and wide. Fenced pasture. A sloping barn. No flowers. Just function. The house was small, square, and worn. But it stood like something that had held storms and stayed upright. She liked that. He didn't offer her tea. Didn't try to charm. Just showed her the crooked door and stepped back like he trusted her with something. She knelt. Studied the hinge. Reached for his toolbox without needing to ask. "Not many women know how to fix things," he said after a while. She kept her eyes on the screw. "Most women don't get the chance." He didn't answer. But the silence between them changed shape. Less distance. More listening. She stayed longer than she meant to. Repaired the coop. Lifted feed sacks. Scrubbed soot from the hearth with a rag she brought from home. He cooked while she worked. Not well but earnestly. Biscuits too hard. Eggs too soft. But it filled the space between them with something almost tender. She ate every bite. When she left, he walked her to the gate. Didn't ask her to return. She did anyway. 3 days later. With a spool of thread and oil for the door. They fell into rhythm. She came most Thursdays. He left small tasks undone. Not because he couldn't do them, but because she could. She fixed what was broken. He fed what was hungry. Neither said more than needed. And slowly, without realizing it, they built something. Not love. Not yet. Something quieter. Respect. One day she found a worn pair of gloves folded on the table where she worked. Not new, but stitched up the sides. Reinforced at the palm. No note. She turned, found him in the doorway, hat in hand. Yours were tearing, he said. Figured it's time someone looked after your hands for once. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't know what to say. Then don't. So she didn't. She just wore them. And her hands didn't ache so much after that. One evening, the town gathered for the winter dance. A tradition built more on routine than joy. She didn't plan to go. She danced once, years ago, in a mill town where men whistled more than they asked. Since then, her body had become something that worked, not something that moved. But he knocked on her door that morning, held out a wrapped parcel. Not a dress, he said quickly. Just a ribbon. For your hair. Thought it might feel good to wear something not earned. She stared at it like it might break. You don't have to come, he added. But if you do, I'd be glad. She didn't say yes. But that night, she walked to the church hall with her head held high, snow brushing her sleeves. Her same skirt. Her same boots. But the ribbon was in her hair. The room quieted when she stepped inside. Not because she made a scene, but because she wasn't supposed to come. The girls in satin dresses turned to whisper. The preacher's wife narrowed her eyes. But he crossed the room with steady steps. Offered his hand without hesitation. She took it with both. They didn't dance well. But they moved. One slow, swaying step at a time. She didn't smile. Not quite. But her eyes stopped searching for the door. They only danced once. But it felt like something more than that. A claiming, not of ownership but of truth. Afterward, she stood alone on the back steps, watching her breath in the cold air. He found her there, coat draped over one arm. You were brave, he said. She shook her head. I was tired of being ashamed. He nodded like he understood. And maybe he did. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For looking at me. He looked again. And in the hush of falling snow, she felt seen. That night, she walked home with her gloves in one pocket, ribbon in the other, and a new kind of ache in her chest. Not from labor. From longing. The next morning, the whispers came louder. She danced with him like she owned him. Did you see her hair? Like a child playing at woman. She's clawing for a place she doesn't belong. She heard every word. Didn't respond. But that evening she didn't return to the ranch. Didn't fix the hinge he'd left loose. Didn't refill the oil. Didn't bring bread. She stayed in. Mended her apron. Braided her hair. And told herself she didn't care. The next day he came to her door. No hat. No bundle. Just stood in the cold like it didn't matter. You all right? She nodded. You didn't come. No. He looked at her, then at his boots. I didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't. They talk. They always do. He nodded. Then stepped closer. I don't care what they say. I don't want soft hands. I want steady ones. She looked up. You sure? I've never been more. He didn't touch her. Didn't ask anything more. But when he walked away, she closed the door behind him and leaned against it. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she needed to disappear. She felt wanted. Not as a prize. Not as pity. As herself. That night, she lit a candle beside her window. Didn't know if he'd see it. Didn't care. She lit it for her. For the girl who had carried wood. For the woman who'd learned to carry her own worth. She began arriving without being asked. Not every day. Not always with a reason. But enough that his porch began to feel like an in-between place. Between where she'd been and something she didn't yet have the courage to name. She brought a folded cloth once. Another time, a jar of lard, just enough for biscuits. He never asked why. She never explained. Some mornings she chopped kindling. Others, she patched the feed sacks or scrubbed the frost off the windows. Her hands still bore the marks of labor, but there was a new stillness in her shoulders, like she had stopped bracing for rejection. The ranch held its breath around her. He didn't fill the air with noise. Didn't pretend at charm or flattery. He was quiet in a way that made room. He listened without interrupting. He fixed what was broken but never rushed what was healing. And she bloomed slowly. Not like wildflowers in spring all at once, but like something growing beneath snow. Quiet. Rooted. Steady. One morning he handed her a tin box. Inside, buttons, needles, scraps of wool, and a note written in a careful, slanted hand. Figured you might want your own. She touched the box like it might vanish. Swallowed the lump in her throat before it made it to her eyes. I never had one. Then you do now. There was no talk of marriage. No promises. No confessions. Just the kind of trust that grew in small acts. A mug placed near the fire for her, a shirt left out because he knew she could mend it, his coat hanging just beside hers as though it had always belonged there. He told her about his land once. Not the acreage or value, but what it had survived. Flood took the east fence, he said one evening watching the clouds gather. Lost the calf that year. Almost lost myself. She looked at him and didn't ask him to explain. Some griefs needed space, not solving. She began humming again. Just softly. While fixing the barn door latch. While kneading dough. While walking the trail back home. It wasn't a song anyone would know. Just a sound that meant she was still here. Still trying. Still hers. One evening, he came home to find her standing in his garden, bare-fingered, frost on her skirt hem. She was turning the soil with a rusted spade, eyes narrowed in concentration. "Can't grow much this time of year," he said. She didn't look up. "I'm not planting. Just letting the ground know I haven't forgotten it." He watched her for a long moment. "I reckon it won't forget you either." The townspeople still whispered. But it had changed. Less sharp now. More curious. "She's still around," someone said. "She never left. She's still not proper." But even that lost its bite. Because she no longer bent beneath it. Because she was becoming something stronger than their judgment. Herself. She brought bread one Sunday. It was uneven, slightly overbaked. She apologized, but he ate every bite, slow and grateful. Next time she brought apple jam. It was tart, but the color made her smile. "I didn't know you cooked," he said. "I didn't know I could." In early spring he handed her a small pouch of seeds. "Not much," he said. "But they're yours if you want 'em." She cupped them gently. "What are they?" "Snapdragons. Used to be my ma's favorite. I've never grown flowers." He tilted his head. "You're growing something now." She didn't answer. Just kept her hands closed around the seeds a moment longer than needed. One evening they sat on the porch as the wind turned warm for the first time in weeks. He handed her a carved wooden bird. Small. Rough-edged. "I started whittling again," he said. "It's lovely. Meant to be a dove. Looks more like a lump with wings." She laughed. "A real one." He smiled. "A quiet kind, like the land when it rains." "You don't have to bring things," she said, voice low. "I know. Then why do you?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Because when you carry heavy things, someone ought to carry something for you." She looked away, but not before he saw the shimmer in her eyes. One morning she woke to find a tin of honey on her doorstep. No note. But she knew. She stirred it into her tea. Sipped slow. It tasted like warmth on cracked lips. Like something earned. They rarely touched. A brush of fingertips when passing tools. A hand steadying her elbow once as she stumbled. But every glance said more than words could. He saw her. Not as a burden. Not as a project. But as someone choosing to stay, when she had every reason to run. And she saw him. Not as a savior. Not as a prize. But as someone who let her rest. Who let her breathe. The town dance came again. Spring this time. She didn't expect an invitation. Didn't need one. But 2 days before he left a package at her door. Inside, a dress. Simple. Soft blue. Nothing fancy. But sewn with care. She held it up with trembling fingers. Beneath it, a note. Not for the dance. For the girl who never thought she could wear one. She stood in his barn that evening, light slanting through the slats, holding the dress against her chest. She didn't cry. But her shoulders shook. Because someone somewhere had looked at her and seen not what she'd done, but who she was becoming. She wore the dress to the dance. Didn't twirl. Didn't float. Just stood by his side, shoulders back, head high. And no one dared whisper. Because the woman who had carried wood, who had mended hinges and scrubbed floors, now carried herself like something holy. They danced only once. But when he placed his hand at her back and held her gaze steady, she forgot every bruise she'd ever tried to hide. And remembered only the sound of her breath in his silence. They didn't speak much that night. But when he walked her home and paused at her door, she turned to him and said, "I don't know what this is." He nodded. "Me neither. But it feels like something that doesn't have to hurt." "No," he said. "It doesn't." She hesitated. Then touched his hand. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just a touch. Like rain touching dry earth for the first time in years. And in the quiet after, she closed her door with the softest smile. Because sometimes the slowest blooms last the longest. Because sometimes, the hand that carried firewood was always meant to carry something far more tender. They came riding in with dust on their boots and sharpness in their voices. 2 men and a woman, dressed finer than the town, faces too polished for the land. But the woman, older, bitter-eyed, had the same mouth shape as hers. That's how she knew. Her sister. Or what had once been her sister. And beside her, the suitor who'd rejected her at the train station. The one who had called her rough, unworthy, unfit. "I hear you've been living like a squatter," he said, voice loud enough for the general store crowd to hear. "Didn't think you'd cling to this place like a weed." She didn't reply. Just folded her arms across her stomach and stood taller. The woman beside him gave a sharp smile. "You're making a fool of yourself. You're not his wife. Not his help. You're a nothing. We came to take you home." She said nothing still. But something inside her curled tighter. Not in fear. In defiance. The quiet rancher came down from the hill that afternoon, slow as ever. His hands dusted with saw work. His eyes calm but not soft. He didn't speak to the outsiders. Just stepped beside her. Close enough for his shoulder to brush hers. Close enough to be counted. The sister sneered. "Oh, I see. So that's what this is. Playing house with a stray. Thought you had better taste." The suitor laughed. But he didn't. He just looked at them both, slow and steady. Then said, "She's not a stray. She's stronger than anyone I've met. And this house, it's hers too if she wants it." The words weren't loud. But they cracked through the air like thunder in a drought. The sister turned red. "You can't keep her." "I'm not property," she said then. Quiet but clear. "And I'm not going with you. You belong to your blood." She met her sister's gaze, steady. "Blood doesn't mean what it used to." The town gathered by supper. Small towns always do. Word passed quicker than light, and soon they were watching her again, just like the day she stepped off the train. But she wasn't bowed this time. She stood in her work skirt, sleeves rolled, hair uncurled by wind, and her hands no longer tried to hide their wear. The suitor's voice rang out again. "This is a disgrace. She was promised. She was paid for. Her father took my coin." The rancher stepped forward. "She's not for sale." "Then you better return what was paid." She stepped forward before the rancher could speak. "I'll pay it." Laughter broke from the suitor's mouth. "With what?" "Baking powder and dirt." She reached into her shawl and pulled out the tin box he'd given her, the one with the needles, the thread, the scraps she'd saved. She opened it slowly. Inside, a pouch of coins she'd earned from every scrubbed floor, every mended shirt, every loaf sold in secret when no one thought her worth more than sweat. She poured it into her palm. "Take it," she said. "That's what I'm worth to you, isn't it?" Metal and silence. The coins hit the dirt at his feet. And she turned away. He didn't stop her. Neither did the town. Because some things don't need defense. They just need truth. And she had spoken hers. That night she didn't go to the ranch. She walked past it, past the fields, into the woods where the air was cleaner and no voices echoed. She stood among the bare trees and breathed until the shaking stopped. Until she remembered that strength isn't about standing tall, it's about standing still when your knees beg to fold. The next morning, a knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find the rancher standing there with a small wooden box in his hand. He didn't offer it right away. Just looked at her like she wasn't broken, only weathered. "Had something to show you," he said. "Been fixing the old place up." He led her down the path to a cabin she hadn't seen before. Not new, but restored. Floor swept. Porch boards replaced. Smoke curling from a stovepipe. He opened the door and stepped aside. Inside was a table. 2 chairs. A shelf already holding her gloves. A spot for her tin box. A folded blue ribbon. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. Because everything he'd done said, "This is for you. If you want it. If you choose it." She turned slowly. Eyes shining. Hands trembling. "I don't want to be rescued," she said. "You weren't," he answered. "You stood. I just built the place you could come home to." She nodded once. Then stepped inside. And didn't leave. Later that week she returned to the general store. Bought nails, a spool of blue thread, and a bolt of soft fabric with her own coins. The girl behind the counter stared. "You making a dress?" "No," she said, smiling quietly. "A curtain." Thought it was time the window had something lovely. In the weeks that followed, no one called her names. They didn't start calling her saint or lady either. She was just her. The woman who once carried wood. The woman who planted seeds before the frost melted. The woman who was asked, not taken. One spring morning, she hung that blue curtain on the window, light catching in its folds. The house smelled of bread and earth and cedar. He came in from the field with mud on his boots and warmth in his eyes. She poured 2 cups of coffee. Set them down. Their hands brushed. And then, for the first time, she reached for his, Not to thank, not to ask, but simply to hold. No words. Just warmth shared between palms that had once known only work. Later that night they sat by the fire, chairs close, silence easy. She turned to him softly. "What made you choose me?" He shook his head. "Didn't choose you. I recognized you." Her voice caught. "Recognized what?" He reached out, tucked a loose strand behind her ear. "My kind." And in that moment she knew she had never been alone. Outside the wind stirred the trees. Inside she leaned her head against his shoulder. And rested. Not because she was tired. But because she could. She had never needed saving. She just needed someone to see that she'd already saved herself. Maybe love isn't always fire and thunder. Maybe sometimes it's a house with 2 mugs. A coat on the hook beside yours. A voice that says you don't have to carry it all alone. And if you'd seen her walking through town that spring, head high, skirt trailing dust and pride, you wouldn't have known she was ever the girl left behind. Because the auction never took her. Not really. Because the moment she stopped apologizing for her worth, the whole world began to rise to meet it. And maybe you, the one reading this, maybe your hands are calloused too. Maybe they've carried too much. Maybe you've heard the whispers, the lies, the no one will ever. But let me tell you something. You are not astray. You are not forgotten. You are not less because you've labored. You are not unlovable because you've hurt. There is strength in your silence, beauty in your breath. And one day, without begging or breaking, you will be seen. And you will choose. Not because you were lucky, but because you were worthy all along. The sky broke open pink and blood orange over the flat-roofed buildings of Dry Creek, a town so used to cruelty it barely flinched anymore. But this morning even the crows had gathered. They circled slow over the gallows. She walked barefoot. Her name was Lottie Dino, and every step was a defiance. Her ankles were raw from the rope they'd tied, her dress soaked in dust and last night's rain, her stomach swollen with the weight of a child who'd never know its father. Her wrists had long since stopped bleeding. Her pride hadn't. "Shoulda kept her legs closed," someone muttered from the crowd. "She shamed the banker's family," said another, "lied about being wed. She killed him," someone whispered too loud. None of it was true. The boy, Lester Blackwell, had ridden out 3 months ago with a loaded pistol and a gold pocket watch, chasing a fortune he never earned. She hadn't seen him since. He left her with promises and a ring that turned her skin green. Now they said she tricked him. Said she was a witch. Said her unborn child was the spawn of sin. All of it made sense to a town starving for someone to blame. The sheriff stood near the gallows, thick arms crossed, sweat glistening on his jowls even in the morning chill. His name was Cyrus Bell. He didn't smile much, but this morning he had a look on his face like a man about to finish a long hunt. Behind him, the noose swung gently in the breeze. Fresh rope. Rough hemp. Still stiff with stiffness and purpose. Lottie Dino stopped walking when they reached the platform. Her lip was split. Her eyes were swollen but clear. "Any last words?" the sheriff asked like he was ordering coffee. Lottie Dino didn't answer. "You confess, girl, and maybe the Lord'll take pity on your soul. Might even show mercy to the bastard you're carrying." A soft murmur rustled through the crowd like dry grass. A few men chuckled. One spat. Lottie Dino lifted her chin. "I loved him," she said. "That's not a sin." The sheriff grunted. "Lying is." He motioned for his deputy, a lanky, bone-eyed man named Rex, to tighten the rope. Rex's fingers shook. He'd touched Lottie Dino once, months ago, tried to press her against the back wall of the saloon after too much rye. She bit him hard enough to scar. He never forgot it. Lottie Dino stood on the trapdoor. Beneath her, the wood creaked and waited. She closed her eyes. The child inside her kicked. There was a moment, thin and silver like the edge of a blade, where the wind dropped, the birds held their breath, and every sound in the square hushed into nothing. Then someone moved. No one saw him arrive. No horse, no boots clacking down the street. 1 second the crowd was still, the next he was standing there, beside the platform. A man in a long black coat. Hat low. One hand on his belt. The other holding something that gleamed. "Let her go." His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was flat. Dry as the bones buried behind the church. The sheriff turned. "Who in hell?" The man raised the blade in his hand. Not a gun. A Bowie knife, long and clean. He stepped up the gallows steps in 3 quiet strides. "Don't be stupid, stranger," Sheriff Bell warned. But the stranger had already reached the rope. Lottie Dino blinked. For a moment the world sharpened, colors brighter, wind colder. The stranger's eyes met hers. "Blow." Unblinking. Duck, he said. She did. One clean slice. The rope dropped like a dead snake. Gasps echoed like pistol shots. Then chaos. Deputy Rex reached for his revolver. The stranger moved first. Gun out. Bang. Rex's hat flew off, the bullet grazing the scalp just enough to draw blood and scare the devil into him. The crowd screamed. Some scattered. Some pulled iron. The stranger didn't flinch. He holstered the revolver and yanked Lottie Dino toward the alley beside the butcher's. She staggered, dazed, feet dragging. The sheriff shouted. Stop them. That man's a killer. A few townsfolk ran forward, hesitant. None reached them in time. They vanished between buildings, kicking up dust and fear behind them. Lottie Dino's breath came in gasps. Her feet bled. Her belly ached with every jolt. Who? She panted. Who are you? The stranger didn't answer. They reached a rotting stable behind the tannery. He lifted her like she weighed nothing and set her behind the saddle of a dapple gray horse. Then he climbed behind her. She thought she'd faint from the speed of it all. From the pain, from the heat of his body behind her, steady as the sun. They rode hard through the brush, sage, creosote, thorn and thunder. The sky broke fully open now, turning harsh with heat. Behind them, gunshots cracked. Once, twice. The stranger didn't look back. Hours passed. Maybe minutes. The blur of flight stole time. Eventually they reached a bluff overlooking the valley. The horse stopped on command, sweating and heaving. Lottie Dino could barely sit upright. She slid off the saddle and fell hard into the dirt. The stranger dismounted, tied the reins and crouched beside her. You're hurt. Lottie Dino looked at him through tears. You saved me. You were about to hang. I know. He offered her a canteen. She drank like a creature on the edge of dying. Finally her voice returned. What's your name? He didn't answer for a long time. The wind picked up, sending his coat flapping like a flag behind him. Jed, he said at last. Jed what? Just Jed. You don't know me? No. Then why? Jed's eyes were sharp. Set. I seen enough men with guns do nothing. I figured I'd try something different. Lottie Dino leaned back, shaking. They'll come for us. Let 'em. You'll die. Jed nodded. Could be. She looked at him, studied his face, the scar that ran from jaw to ear, the calluses on his knuckles, the way he never seemed to blink unless it mattered. You knew someone, she said. Someone they hung. He didn't confirm it. Didn't deny it. Lottie Dino looked at the sky. The baby kicked again. Harder this time. I was innocent, she whispered. I know. Jed looked out over the horizon. A hawk floated high, drifting slow and mean. Below them, nothing but sunlit scrubland and dust trails stretched like broken ribbons. Where are we going? Lottie Dino asked. Far enough. Why me? Jed sighed. You asked me that already? No. I mean, why really? There's always a reason. Even for men like you. He paused. There was a woman. Long time ago. Same gallows. Different crowd. I hesitated. What happened? He took off his hat, wiped sweat from his brow. His eyes were haunted. She didn't get a rope like yours. Hers was frayed. Snapped halfway down. Broke her spine instead. Lottie Dino said nothing. I didn't cut it, he finished. Silence spread between them like dusk. She sat upright slowly, arms wrapping her stomach. Well, she said, I guess now you did. He looked at her, a ghost of something like relief flickering across his jaw. I guess I did. In the distance a crow called. Then another. Far behind them, a faint echo of hooves. Lottie Dino felt her breath hitch. Jed stood, checked his pistol, then helped her to her feet. They'll be here soon, she said. He nodded. We ride at night. And if they find us? He looked down at her belly. Then we don't stop moving. Not until they've got no reason left to chase. Lottie Dino's lips parted. Not quite a smile. Not yet. The wind swept her hair across her face. She pushed it back, looked him dead in the eyes. You don't talk much, do you? No. I like that. They stood for a moment on the edge of something neither could name. Just two bruised souls beneath a sky too big for sorrow. Then the wind shifted. Jed turned toward the sunset, toward the trail ahead. Lottie Dino followed him. And behind them, in the town that cheered her death, the gallows swayed in an empty breeze, waiting for someone else. They didn't speak for the first hour. The horse moved steady, ribs showing with every breath, hooves striking the baked earth in a rhythm like a tired heartbeat. Lottie Dino swayed in the saddle, her hands gripping the horn, her eyes unfocused. Jed rode behind her, silent, alert, one hand never straying far from the revolver at his hip. The wind had picked up again. Dust streaked across the open plains. Every now and then, Lottie Dino would steal a glance backward. Nothing yet. No riders. No silhouettes. But fear moved faster than horses. She winced when the child kicked again, hard, sharp, as if even the baby sensed the noose still hanging behind them. Jed noticed. "You need to stop?" She shook her head. "Not unless we want to die. Could be we'll die anyway. Then I'd rather not be sittin' still when it happens." He gave a small nod. By dusk, they reached a dry creek. Jed led the horse down a steep decline, then into a narrow canyon dotted with crooked rocks and sun-bleached shrubs. They stopped in a shaded hollow near a split in the ravine wall. "Here," Jed said. "We camp." Lottie Dino slid off the saddle with a grunt, catching herself on a rock. Her legs were trembling. Jed unsaddled the horse, tied it off, then crouched near a blackened fire pit, left by someone long gone. He struck a match, cupped it, and lit the kindling. Flames caught slow, licking dry sticks like tongues remembering heat. She sat on the ground, knees drawn, one hand on her belly. The other rubbed at the welts on her wrists. Jed tossed her a biscuit. She caught it midair. "What's in it?" she asked. "Hope," he said deadpan. She cracked a smile. "Small. Right." The biscuit was dry as sand, but she chewed it like it was gold. They didn't speak for a while. The canyon cooled fast. Shadows stretched like spilled ink. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote howled, sharp and high and lonely. Jed fed the fire. "You always save hanged women?" she asked quietly. "No. Just the ones that don't deserve it." "And how do you know I didn't?" "You don't have the eyes of someone guilty." "You think guilt shows in the eyes?" He looked at her, face unreadable in the flickering light. "Always." She broke her biscuit in half. "Then maybe I fooled you." He didn't respond. She shifted, trying to get comfortable on the rocky ground. "You ever been married?" Jed's brow twitched. "Once." "What happened?" He tossed a twig into the flames. Cracked. "Gallows." She lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I carry her with me." "You don't talk like the others." Jed snorted. "What others?" "The men that watched me walk to my death." Jed leaned back on his elbows, looking up at the stars coming alive overhead. They weren't men. Just boys with beards. Lottie Dino stared at the fire. "The worst part wasn't the rope," she said. "It was the silence. Nobody looked at me. Like I wasn't even there." Jed turned his head slightly. "You were there," he said. "Still are." The word struck something deep in her. "Why do you think they hated me so much?" she asked. Jed didn't hesitate. "'Cause you didn't fold." She nodded slowly. Silence returned, thick and shared. Then, hooves. Jed sat up fast. Ears sharp. Gun drawn. In the distance, echoing faint against canyon walls, hooves. Fast. Reckless. Closing in. He moved to the fire and kicked dirt over it. "On your feet," he said. Lottie Dino struggled up, breath tight. "How many?" "Don't know." "Too close." He pulled her to the horse and helped her up. Then he grabbed the rifle from the saddle and slung it across his back. "Hold tight." He mounted behind her, spurred the horse into motion, and they thundered deeper into the ravine. The canyon narrowed, then opened suddenly into a dry wash. Jed guided the horse through a break in the rocks, up a slope, and onto open ground lit by a silver sliver of moon. Lottie Dino looked back. 3 riders. Shadows moving fast, guns glinting in the dark. "They're close." Jed turned the horse hard, heading toward a thicket of mesquite. Branches whipped past, scraping his arms and face. The horse jumped a narrow ditch and kept running. Bullets cracked behind them. One zinged past Lottie Dino's ear. She ducked. Jed didn't flinch. He veered again, this time toward a ledge. Lottie Dino cried out as the horse nearly lost its footing, but they made it. Over. Gone. Then silence. No more shots. No more hooves. Jed pulled the horse behind a cluster of boulders and waited, listening. Lottie Dino's chest rose and fell fast. Her hands clutched her belly. I think something's wrong." Jed turned to her. "You hurt?" "No, yes, I don't know. It's tight." He helped her down. She leaned against the rock, gasping. Jed crouched beside her, checked her pulse, her eyes. "It ain't labor," he said. "Just the ride." "How can you tell?" "Because I've seen labor. It screams louder." Lottie Dino gave a breathless laugh. "That's reassuring." Jed stood, rifle ready. "Stay here. I'll check the ridge." She grabbed his coat. Don't leave me. He paused, then nodded. All right. They waited together, backs against the stone, breaths shallow. After some time the night quieted. Still Jed didn't relax. They'll regroup, he said. Find another trail. Lottie Dino leaned her head back. So we run again. No. No. We fight. She turned to him. You and me. I fought worse with less. Jed, I'm pregnant. I noticed. Then you're crazy. Maybe. She stared at him, trying to see through the calm in his face. You really want to die out here? No. I want to make them wish they never chased us. Lottie Dino shook her head. You talk like you've got nothing to lose. I don't. Well, she said, sitting up straighter. I do. He looked at her belly. You sure? She nodded. He may not have a father, but I won't let that mean he doesn't have a life. Jed stood. Then we make our stand. Where? He pointed toward a dark line on the horizon. Old ranch. Abandoned. Got walls. Maybe a rifle or two. You sure? No. But we've got a choice, Lottie Dino said. Run or die. She looked up. Let's not do either. The next morning they moved before the sun. The land stretched before them like the back of a sleeping beast, silent, vast, and hungry. Jed rode slow, careful to leave false trails. Lottie Dino rode steady behind him now, her back straighter, her eyes hardening like cooling iron. They reached the ranch near midday. It was barely standing. A skeletal barn. A main house with its porch half fallen. Wind blew through broken shutters. But it had cover. A wall. And a view of the whole plain. Jed dismounted. We make our stand here. Lottie Dino touched the porch post, splintered and old. This place smells like death. Jed nodded. So do most places worth fighting for. Inside it was dark and cool. Mice scattered. Dust choked the air. Jed found a rusted shotgun behind the hearth and some old buckshot in a drawer. He turned to Lottie Dino. You ever shoot? She nodded. My daddy taught me before he drank himself into the ground. Jed handed her the shotgun. Good. We'll need both barrels. They boarded windows. Laid traps near the fence. Piled rocks near the doorway. Then they waited. Night fell fast. Lottie Dino sat in a corner, the shotgun across her lap. Jed cleaned his revolver in silence. You scared? She asked. He shrugged. Fear's a tool. Just gotta sharpen it right. She watched him. You think we'll make it? Jed holstered the revolver. I think we'll make sure they don't. Outside wind picked up. A shape moved in the distance. Then another. Again. Lottie Dino stood. Jed followed. 3 riders. One holding a lantern. The flicker cast long shadows as they neared. Jed raised his rifle. Lottie Dino stepped beside him, shotgun steady. They watched. The riders stopped 50 yards out. One stepped forward. Tall. Thin. Grinning. Deputy Rex. His voice carried. Got yourself a little hideout, huh, cowboy? Jed said nothing. You think you can keep her? That whore? You think that badge don't reach out here? Jed raised the rifle. Go back, he called. She's wanted. No. She's mine now. Lottie Dino stiffened. Jed didn't look at her. Rex laughed. Well then, he said. Let's see if you can keep what's yours. The other 2 riders raised their guns. Jed fired first. The shot split the air. Then everything turned to smoke and thunder. The first shot hit the porch post an inch from Lottie Dino's shoulder. She didn't flinch. Jed fired again. One of Rex's men tumbled backward off his horse, boots still twitching as the dust swallowed him whole. The second rider returned fire, wild and wide. Buckshot tore through the side of the barn, splintering wood into deadly slivers. Jed dropped low, pulling Lottie Dino with him as the windows behind them shattered. You all right? He asked. She checked herself, hands over belly, breath steady. Still here. The horse outside screamed and galloped off riderless. The second man had taken a bullet in the thigh and was dragging himself toward the fence, leaving a trail like spilled ink. Jed rose again. A clean shot. 1 bullet. The man went still. Only Rex remained. But he was gone. Jed scanned the open plain. Nothing. No rider. No tracks. Damn, he muttered. Lottie Dino stood, brushing dust from her skirt. Her fingers trembled, but her jaw was set. He ran? Cowards don't fight fair. He'll come back with more. Lottie Dino looked at the blood pooled outside the doorway. Then we need to be gone by the time he does. Jed leaned on his rifle, face unreadable. You still want to run? Lottie Dino walked to the body nearest the gate. She bent, grunted, lifted the saddlebag and tossed it inside. "We run now," she said. "But next time, we end it." He stared at her a moment, then nodded. Inside the house, they packed supplies with quiet urgency. The saddlebag held cartridges, jerky, a flask of whiskey. Jed took the bullets. Lottie Dino kept the jerky. "You're not who I expected," Jed said as he cinched the saddle. Lottie Dino looked up. "What did you expect?" "A girl hanging on her knees, begging to be saved." "You ever think I was savon you too?" Jed didn't answer. They rode west into the hills, away from Dry Creek and toward a canyon Jed remembered from years back. A place too rugged for a posse, too narrow for horses, too dry to matter to anyone else. It took all night to reach it. The moon had thinned by then, turned pale and distant. A wind blew sand against their faces. Lottie Dino's eyes were red from exhaustion, and her back ached so bad she had to dismount and walk half a mile just to breathe again. Jed watched her quietly. He didn't offer to carry her. He didn't need to. At dawn, they found a cave hidden beneath a ledge of slate and thorn. It was shallow but dry. Inside, the earth was cool and smelled of stone and forgotten time. Lottie Dino lay down without asking. Jed set the rifle near the entrance, back to the wall, and slid down beside her. For a long time neither spoke. The storm came that afternoon. It announced itself with thunder, low and rolling like something ancient waking up. Then came the rain. Heavy. Relentless. Beating the canyon floor like fists on a coffin. Lottie Dino jolted awake with a gasp, soaked from the shoulders down. She pushed herself up slowly, one hand at her back, the other over her belly. Jed stirred but didn't move. His hat was pulled low, the coat drawn tight around him. "You sleep?" she asked. "No." "You breathe?" He cracked a dry smile. "Barely." She sat beside him. The cave roof dripped in steady rhythm. "This baby," she whispered, "is more stubborn than both of us." Jed raised an eyebrow. "Takes after you then?" Lottie Dino laughed, surprised at the sound. It echoed softly off the stone. "I've never known someone like you," she said. "Quiet. Watchful. Hard to read. Then you're reading the wrong pages. Then show me the right ones." He looked at her a long moment. The storm boomed again, closer now. He shifted, pulling a flask from his coat, uncorked it, and passed it to her. She drank, grimaced, coughed. "Burns like hell," she said. "Means it's working. She handed it back. "Your wife. What was her name?" His face changed. Not grief exactly, just the memory of it. "Ellen." "Pretty name." "She was tough. Meaner than I was. Would have loved you." Lottie Dino swallowed hard. "She die alone?" "No." He looked down. "I held her hand." Lottie Dino's voice softened. "Then she died lucky." Jed didn't speak again for a while. Outside, lightning cracked so bright it lit the cave in ghost white. The thunder that followed shook the rocks under their boots. "Where do we go now?" she asked. Jed took a long breath. "North. There's a town called Ash Hollow. Quiet place. I know a man there. Marshall. Won't ask questions." "You think we can start over?" "No. But we can keep walking like we already did." Lottie Dino smiled. "Sounds like something Ellen would say." He looked at her, something warm flickering behind his weathered face. She would. The rain slowed. The cave dimmed. Lottie Dino leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not asking me to be small." Jed watched her fall asleep. He didn't move for hours. When the rain stopped, it left the world cleaner. The canyon glistened. Puddles shimmered in the morning light. Jed saddled the horse. Lottie Dino stirred and rose, slower than before but steadier. She mounted without help. They moved through the canyon, its walls closing like stone arms around them. As they neared the bend, Jed paused. "Tracks. Fresh ones. Too many." He turned the horse sharply. "We've got company." Lottie Dino stiffened. "Who?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. From the shadows ahead, 6 riders emerged. All dressed in brown and gray. One in black. "Rex." He grinned, spitting to the side. "Told you we'd meet again." Jed raised his rifle. Lottie Dino raised her chin. Rex pulled his coat back, resting a hand on his holster. "You run good," he said. "But you ain't ghosts. And I ain't done watching you hang." Jed stepped forward. "You want me? Take me." "No," Rex said, eyes shifting to Lottie Dino. "I want her. She's the one who shamed my kin. The one who made a fool of this whole damn town." Lottie Dino's voice rang sharp. "Your kin ran. He was a boy." "So am I," she snapped. But I'm still standing. One of the men laughed, quickly silenced by Rex's glare. Jed spoke calmly. Let us pass. We walk away, you keep breathing. Rex's smile twisted. You think I'm scared of a broken gunman and a girl with a belly? No, Jed said. I think you're scared of the truth. Rex's hand moved. Jed fired. The bullet hit Rex's horse. The beast reared, screaming. Rex fell hard, his head cracking on the stone. The men hesitated. Lottie Dino grabbed the shotgun from her saddlebag. One rider raised a pistol. She fired first. The blast echoed through the canyon. The man dropped. Jed fired again. Another rider fell. The rest turned and ran, dragging their wounded, panic spreading like wildfire. Rex groaned, rolling over dazed. Jed stood over him. You don't get a noose, he said. You get left. He turned away. Lottie Dino looked down at Rex, eyes cold. You made me believe I deserved to die, she said. Now you know what that feels like. They left him in the canyon, bloodied and broken, beneath the rising sun. As they rode north, Lottie Dino said nothing for a long time. Then, you didn't kill him. Jed nodded. No. Why? 'Cause now he has to live with what he lost. She nodded slowly. That's worse. They reached the rim of the canyon by noon. Before them, the land stretched wide and green, a promise painted across the horizon. Jed shaded his eyes. Ash Hollow's a week's ride. Lottie Dino took the reins. Then let's not waste it. They rode together, the quiet between them no longer empty, but full of everything they'd lived through. The storm had passed. But they both knew storms never truly ended. Only waited. Ash Hollow looked harmless at first glance. Just a row of tired buildings leaning into each other like old friends. A church steeple poking toward a cloudless sky. A dry well at the center, surrounded by dust that never settled. The wind here didn't whistle. It whispered like it knew things it shouldn't. Jed didn't ride straight in. He circled from the ridge, watching. Eyes narrowed, hand resting on the revolver that had grown heavier these past weeks. Lottie Dino sat behind him, her arms wrapped loosely around his waist, belly pressing into his back with every breath. Looks quiet, she said. Quiet don't mean safe. Still, she murmured, better than gallows and gunmen. He glanced over his shoulder. Her face was thinner now, sterner. No trace of the girl who once flinched at rope or judgment. She had become something else, something rooted and resilient like desert stone. They rode down the slope slow, boots stirring dust. Townsfolk paused to stare. One boy dropped his apple and ran. The sheriff stepped out of his office before the horse had even stopped. Jed Malone, he said, crossing his arms. Heard rumors. Thought you were dead. Jed dismounted. Not yet. The sheriff was broad, older, with a thick mustache and skin that had seen too much sun. Marshal Elias Brand had been many things, gunslinger, cattleman, preacher's son, but above all he was a man who read people fast. His eyes slid to Lottie Dino. She met them. Then she spoke first. We need a place. Elias's eyes lingered a beat too long on her belly. Jed stepped between them. We won't stay long. Elias nodded toward the old livery. Still standing. Barely. You can rest there tonight. No questions. Lottie Dino asked. I ask him later, he said. After I hear the story you're ready to tell. They made a small camp in the livery loft, between broken rafters and old straw. The light was soft, golden through the slats, full of motes that danced in silence. Lottie Dino sat cross-legged on a blanket, chewing jerky with a blank stare. Jed paced. Shouldn't have come here, he muttered. She wiped her mouth. It was your idea. I meant the hills north of here. Not this town. What's wrong with it? He stopped pacing. Ash Hollow's where I gave up. She looked at him then fully. On what? He hesitated. Then, everything. Lottie Dino let that hang. What made you try again? You. The word caught in the air between them. Outside, children laughed somewhere too far away to touch. Church bells rang once. A cart passed. Normalcy hummed beneath their storm, uncaring. Lottie Dino leaned back against a beam. You think we'll ever have that? Normal? Jed sat beside her. No. But we'll have ours. The next morning, Lottie Dino woke to find a folded shirt beside her, clean. A basin of warm water. A tin comb. She touched each thing gently. Outside, Jed spoke with Elias on the porch of the saloon. His voice low. Grim. Lottie Dino watched through a crack in the wall. Elias didn't interrupt much. Just nodded. Smoked. Let Jed unravel the story like a man laying out a wound to air. Lottie Dino walked out when it was nearly done. Her dress clean now, hair tied back, sun on her face. Elias looked up. "I need to speak too," she said. Jed made space. "I was sentenced for a crime I didn't commit," she began. "They called me a liar. Said I tricked a boy into marriage. He left. I stayed. I bled. I carried the child they blamed me for." Elias didn't flinch. "I didn't beg," she said. "But I did break. And she looked at Jed. "He caught what was left of me. Held it together. Now I'm trying to be whole again." Elias studied them both. "There's a price on your heads. You know that." Jed nodded. Elias scratched his beard. "But this town don't take kindly to bounty hunters. Or false hangings." Lottie Dino straightened. "Then we'll earn our stay. You want to work? I want to live." Elias gave a grunt. "The pastor's wife needs help at the orphan house. And the doctor ain't got steady hands anymore." Jed tipped his hat. "We'll see what we can do." They worked. Lottie Dino mended dresses, cleaned floors, learned names of children who flinched at sudden sounds. She told them stories at night, ones with better endings than hers had started. Jed chopped wood. Old sacks. Helped the old doctor stitch a ranch hand's broken leg. He didn't speak much, but his presence was enough. Steady hands. Sharp eyes. The town softened. Slowly. Not all the way. Not yet. But then came a letter. Folded, creased, carried by a rider with dust on his boots and sweat in his eyes. Elias read it twice before walking to the livery. Lottie Dino saw the change in his face before he spoke. "They're coming." Jed stood. "How many?" "Too many. And not just bounty men. They're calling it justice." "From where?" "Dry Creek." Lottie Dino blinked. "That town has no justice." "Doesn't matter," Elias said. "They want a show. A reckoning. They've petitioned a circuit judge." "Then they want blood," Jed muttered. Elias nodded. "They'll ride in 2 days." Lottie Dino rose. "Then we ride first." Jed turned to her. "Lottie Dino." "No," she said. "They dragged me once. I won't be dragged again." Elias cleared his throat. "There's another way." They looked at him. "I'll stand for you. As marshal. You'll be tried here. No ropes. No crowds. But truth. That's all I can offer." Jed clenched his jaw. That truth's twisted. Lottie Dino's hand found his. "But it's better than running," she said. He looked at her long and hard, then nodded. The trial was set in the church. One long bench became a judge's seat. The rest filled with townsfolk, men and women who'd seen Lottie Dino's kindness and Jed's silence and didn't quite know what to believe. Lottie Dino stood alone. The preacher opened with a prayer. The doctor testified. The pastor's wife spoke gently of Lottie Dino's strength. Jed remained silent until the end. When he finally stood, the room stilled. "I've killed men," he said plainly. "Some for money. Some for mistakes." A child coughed in the back. "But I never saved one," he continued, "until her. And maybe that's what this is. Redemption. Or maybe it's just righting one wrong with another. Either way, I'd do it again." Lottie Dino looked at him. Her eyes filled but did not spill. The preacher gave the final word. "Mercy is the heart of justice," he said. And both were denied this woman once. The verdict was unanimous. Lottie Dino was free. But the crowd that came from Dry Creek never saw the trial. They saw only the verdict. And they brought fire. They arrived after dusk, torches in hand, pistols on hips, righteousness burning in their throats. They shouted her name. Called for Jed. Demanded blood. Elias stepped out first. Rifle raised. No mob rules here. The men didn't care. Until Lottie Dino walked out. Hair braided. Shirt tucked. Her belly heavy. Her stance unshaking. "I walked to my death once," she said. "You watched. You cheered. You said I wasn't worth savant." She held her arms wide. "Well, I'm still here." A hush fell. A boy in the front lowered his torch. Jed stepped out behind her. No gun drawn. Just presence. Lottie Dino kept going. "You think hanging me will make you whole? Then do it. But this time, you'll have to look me in the eyes when the rope tightens." Not a man moved. Then Elias spoke. "This town saw her. Judged her. Freed her. If you want blood, you'll have to spill it over our graves." The standoff held. Until, slowly, one by one, they turned. Not because they were merciful, but because she didn't flinch. Lottie Dino turned to Jed. "You still want to run?" He shook his head. "No." She took his hand. "Then let's build." They left the fire behind them. Dry Creek's men had vanished into the dark like smoke after a storm, their torches flickering out one by one. No bullets had flown. No fists had landed. But something far deeper had broken. Whatever held their hate together had splintered in the face of Lottie Dino standing tall, unflinching, in the light of the church window. Jed watched the dust settle around her boots, watched the wind play with the hem of her coat. She didn't say anything. Didn't look back at the church. Just turned slowly and walked down the street like it was hers. And maybe it was now. 2 days passed before the baby came. It happened under the lean-to beside the livery, where Lottie Dino had made her small world. A cot, a basin, a shelf with cracked dishes. The preacher's wife sat with her through the night. Jed didn't pace. He stood in the doorway, fists clenched, eyes trained on the rising moon. No screams. Lottie Dino bit them back. Held the pain like she had held everything, quiet, hard, inward. By dawn the child arrived, red-faced, furious, alive. A girl. The preacher's wife wept harder than Lottie Dino did. Jed didn't touch the baby at first. He just stared as if daring the world to try and take this one too. When Lottie Dino finally held the bundle out to him, he took it with hands that had killed for coin and mercy alike, and felt, for the first time in years, the shaking begin from somewhere inside. "She's yours now," Lottie Dino said, voice raw. "She was never not," he answered. The town sent gifts, wooden toys, bread, flannel, silence. No one said it aloud, but something had shifted. The woman they tried to hang was now the one they trusted with their children. The man who'd cut the rope was now the one they nodded to on the street. But peace is never permanent on the frontier. It came in the form of a rider, tall, lean, dressed in black, with a badge from a different county and eyes that looked like they forgot how to blink. His name was Holt. Marshal from Greystone. No relation to Lottie Dino. Just bad luck. He came with papers. Real ones. Signed by a judge 2 states over. "They're filing murder charges," he said flatly, "for the men shot in the canyon." Jed leaned against the wall of the saloon, arms crossed. "They came to kill us. You can say that to a jury." Lottie Dino stepped out from behind him. Her face had no fear. No softness either. "You come to take him?" "I come to take both." Lottie Dino looked at her daughter, sleeping in a sling against her chest. "Then you'll need 6 coffins." The marshal didn't smile. "I don't want blood. I want law." "Law left me hanging once," she said. "Didn't even ask if I was innocent." "This ain't about guilt," the marshal replied. "It's about order." Jed stood. "You drag her out of here, and you'll find the only order left is the one we bury you under." The marshal studied him. Then Elias stepped between them. "This is Ash Hollow. You want to arrest someone, you file with me. Until then we're a town, not a trap." The marshal left, but he didn't ride fast. He was the kind that waited for angles to turn in his favor. That night Lottie Dino packed. Jed didn't argue. "I thought we stopped running," he said as she folded a blanket. "We did," she said. "Now we're moving." He watched her check the shotgun. It was cleaner than his. She was faster with it now too. "I won't let them take you," he said. "They won't," she replied, "because we won't be here when they come." He walked to her slowly. "You afraid?" "Yes, but not of them." "Of what then?" "That we'll get old," she said, "and forget who we were when we stood on that gallows." He looked at her like she was the beginning and end of everything worth surviving. "We won't," he said. "Not while we breathe." They left before sunup, baby asleep against Lottie Dino's chest, Jed riding close, eyes sweeping the horizon. They didn't take much. Just what they needed to stay alive. What mattered had already been carved into them. Ash Hollow watched them go without farewell, but not without memory. The town had changed. Because they had. Or maybe the town was always waiting for someone brave enough to make it honest. 3 days into the trail, the marshal returned. He didn't bring papers this time. He brought men. They caught up outside a red canyon where the rock curved like a cradle. Jed saw the dust first. Then the riders, 4 of them. 1 wore a deputy's star. 2 carried rifles. The 4th was just a boy, barely 20, eyes hungry for something he didn't understand. Lottie Dino handed the baby to Jed and stepped forward. "I'm not afraid to die," she said. The marshal dismounted. "Then you won't mind making this easy." Jed raised his rifle. "So won't we." The standoff was sharp as glass. The baby stirred. Lottie Dino's hand tightened on her holster. The deputy lifted his weapon a hair too fast. Jed fired first. The boy dropped his rifle and ran. The deputy never got a shot off. The marshal dove for cover, barking orders, but it was too late. Lottie Dino moved like someone who remembered the gallows every morning. She flanked them, gun steady, every bullet placed with purpose. When the dust settled, only the marshal remained alive. Bleeding, gasping, dragging himself backward through the red dirt. Jed walked to him slowly. "You could have walked away." The marshal coughed. "So could you." "I did once," Jed said. "And I let someone die for it." He looked back at Lottie Dino. She was checking the baby, fingers gentle, blood on her boots. "This time," Jed said, "I stayed." The marshal spat blood. "You think this changes anything?" Jed holstered his gun. It already did. They buried the dead in silence. No words spoken. No stones marked. Just earth over men who'd mistaken cruelty for justice. That night, they made camp under a grove of cottonwoods. The baby slept in a sling beside the fire. Lottie Dino sat beside Jed, hands in her lap, face turned toward the stars. "What do we call her?" she asked. Jed looked at the sleeping bundle. "Hope." Lottie Dino smiled. "Too soft." "Then Mercy." She turned to him. "Mercy's what we never got." He thought for a while. "Then, let's call her Rue." Lottie Dino raised a brow. "That's a sorrowful name." "It means regret," Jed said. "But it also means healing. Depends who says it." She nodded. "Rue Malone." "Rue Holt Malone," he corrected. Lottie Dino leaned against him, closing her eyes. "You're a strange man, Jed." "I'm yours," he said simply. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. By morning they were gone again, into the wild, into the wind, into a world that didn't offer peace but gave them something better. The freedom to keep rewriting their ending one step at a time. And somewhere far behind them, in a town that once tried to hang her, the gallows still stood, but the rope meant for her remained unused. Just a reminder of who she was, and who she refused to become.